Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ, rolling back into town from his home area, Nashville, the friendly confines of Nissan Stadium, where the Tennessee Volunteers blew out the Virginia Cavaliers. And Ryan, this is our first post-game show we've ever done, just the two of us this season, and we were talking before we got started. You're not going to like this. You're not going to have a good time. The vibes are not the same. No Rick Butler here. No Jack Foster. No Ethan Stone. No normal Vol level-headed conversations are happening on this very program, sir. This is the takeoff. This is the take dome. And I am excited because I have some takes. I have some thoughts. I mean, I'm doing the college football show with Matt later on tonight following Florida State LSU. So I'll expand a little bit more, but this is like the precursor here. This is just all Vols all the time. Ryan, are you ready to talk some Tennessee football, some actual games after 9 months away?
Yeah. Well, I'm ready to talk about actual games. I'm a little scared to talk about it with you. I mean, you did tell me before we started recording that you were going to break me this football season, which it's game one. So, no, I mean, definitely excited to talk a little ball and talk about an opener that largely went about as expected.
Did it go as expected, about as expected to you? Because one of my strongest takeaways was, like, I don't think it went the way I thought it was going to go at all, in a multitude of facets. I thought Tennessee won in a way that I had not anticipated they were going to win, but I think you could look at it as a positive, where the receivers being the biggest losers of the afternoon is actually probably the best case scenario for Tennessee, because you're like, oh, this is positive. Tennessee showed they can win in a very different style and a very different kind of way, where the yards per attempt weren't there, the deep shots weren't there. Maybe that was by design. Maybe it was just with the offensive linemen rotating and without Cooper, and maybe you just didn't want to air it out and just kind of show too much about what you're going to do, unlock Dante Thornton and Squirrel getting banged up and stuff. But I don't know. I think my strongest takeaway was, like, the receivers were pretty bad by and large, and the Tennessee Volunteers didn't miss a beat. So the folks who are worried about Tennessee being able to diversify and evolve year over year in this Heupel offense, I think yesterday was probably a statement in the fact that Jaylen Wright is the Tennessee offense's best player, and I don't even think it's particularly close in 2023.
I agree with that. Certainly the whatever it was, I think 5 straight drives in the first quarter into the second quarter after Tennessee's opening drive touchdown, where Tennessee didn't score. Like, I didn't see the game going like that necessarily. But overall, I mean, I'm not shocked by it. And you mentioned not a huge day for any receiver. Squirrel White and Dante Thornton, probably the two most explosive receivers, most talked about in the offseason. Really, neither of them did a ton. I know Squirrel White caught maybe 6 passes for 50 yards, but a lot of short stuff. But at the same time, I think Ramel Keaton catches an 80-yard touchdown that's right in his lap. That narrative kind of changes. He goes for whatever it would have been, 150 yards almost, and then Joe Milton throws for nearly 300 yards in the game, and I think the conversation's a little bit different. And I think the fact that Tennessee leaned heavy on the run, it's not shocking from anyone that's followed this team all summer, all offseason. You knew this was going to be a more run-heavy team, and in an opener against Virginia's defense, certainly better than its offense, and that was as expected. But even then, it was a team Tennessee could really kind of inflict their will in the running game with their physicality up front. So I think it wasn't as explosive as it could have been. And some of that's mistakes, operational things. Milton wasn't perfect, as Rick said. Ramel Keaton had a big drop. But overall, I don't think it was necessarily shocking that that's how things went. And, just to, toot my own horn a little bit here, I had 48-13. 48-14 was my score prediction. So I was off by 1 point on both teams. So I was all over it with the final score prediction.
I wonder too, like with the score, and I told somebody because they were asking me like, what is the final score? And I'm like, I would stick away from that with the clock stuff, where I'm like, I have no idea what that's going to do to possessions. Tennessee's going to be one of the few that it doesn't affect. Like, they still had a bunch of possessions. It just, the points, I think I'm always going to take the under on what, maybe until Vegas adjusts on what the new scoring normal the new scoring norms, I guess, with the new clock rules come into effect. But like, I wonder what the score looks like if we are under the same rules. Maybe Tennessee's in the 50s at that point. But I think it kind of reminded me a lot of the Clemson game when I think back to it. Outside of the deep shots that Tennessee was hitting in that one, in terms of the defense, I think did play a lot better in that Clemson game. And I think the takeaway here was the defensive line is the strongest it's been in the Heupel era. And unfortunately for Ryan Schumpert and our DMs, and on this very program, we have to lead off with the America's favorite segment on Go Big Guards Recap, which is where Chase was right. And where Chase was right all offseason was it's not Joshua Josephs. It's not Roman Harrison. It's not Tyler Barron, who had 2 sacks yesterday. It was James Pearce, where, look, you put up the videos on Rocky Top Insider's YouTube page where we see guys get off the line with Rodney Garner doing that little drill where he pulls it up with the stick. He pulls it up.
Yep.
The fastest guy and the best twitch, the biggest physical specimen doing that drill for the last 2 years has been James Pearce. We were like, oh yeah, James Pearce. And so much of being a Leo guy is just being able to beat these guys one-on-one in different ways and overpowering them and being kind of just a physical freak. James Pearce is a physical freak at that Leo spot, and he got home early and often in this one and had a breakout. And a lot of the guys, when you heard them talk about in the post game, where they're like, we weren't surprised about James Pearce's coming out, it's because like I'm sure they all see it in practice all the time, where it's like, no, we look around, you can see it. James Pearce looks like a first-round Leo guy, potential-wise, and if that's the new James Pearce, Tennessee's defensive line is going to be quite good in 2023.
Certainly, I mean, that's definitely true. And I mean, the only thing Tennessee, if we talk about an offseason, what Tennessee's defensive line was missing was consistent edge pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And James Pearce looked like a guy that could do that in the opener against Virginia. Fascinating how they used him. It still feels like he's a little slender to consistently play every down. Not to say he can't be out there on first and second down and hold up some against a run, but he still was, outside of those third down pass rush packages, pretty even with Josh Josephs on snaps behind Roman Harrison. So I think it becomes interesting how much can they grow him and what he does besides just being a third down pass rusher. And then just obviously, Virginia's, I hate to be the guy to pump the brakes a little bit. That's a really bad Virginia offensive line. And one of his sacks was also just a complete bust. He doesn't get touched and goes in and sacks Tony Muskett. At the same time, it wasn't like he just had 2 sacks and wasn't affecting the game other than that. I don't mean to suggest that either. There were a lot of plays he was in the backfield impacting things where he didn't get a tackle, didn't get a sack. But I think that's generally, as good as Tennessee's defensive line looks, there has to just be like a little bit of, all right, let's wait and see, because Virginia's very, very bad offensive line. Very bad offensive line.
And the biggest thing, too, these are all on third downs, where it's actually Tennessee has a scary third down pass rush for the first time in the Heupel era, where Omar Norman-Lott, Amari Thomas, Tyler Barron, and James Pearce is a scary foursome. Like, that is something we have not seen. We've been waiting for it. But if that's the big four and they're healthy, it's a really, really good big four. And it also makes things better when Tate McCullough is getting every single snap at safety for the foreseeable future, it looks like.
Tate McCullough didn't hardly come out of the game at any meaningful time. As Tim Banks said, I guess it would have been last week. It all starts and ends with Jaylen McCullough in the back end, which is what every Vol fan wants to hear. But no, you're right. Omar Norman-Lott is, to me, he was the under the radar guy that really stood out. Well, I have 2 of them actually, but on the defensive line, he was the under the radar guy that stood out. He didn't make a ton of tackles. He didn't have a sack. 2 of those guys you just mentioned in that third down package had 2 sacks. So he's not going to get a ton of mention, but I was really impressed with him. And that's kind of a coordination, probably wouldn't be the right word, but just a continuation of what you heard all offseason, where Tennessee gets him from Arizona State, solid player at Arizona State, probably going to help them be in the rotation, not high expectations. And then Dejon Terry leaves at the real start of June, I think it was, or maybe end of May. And it's like, all right, they're going to need Omar Norman-Lott to play and be at least good. And in all fall camp, he was a guy you just heard a ton of buzz about. So I thought his debut, while statistically wasn't fantastic, was really impressive. And then Tyler Barron, again, Tyler Barron loves the early season game against the ACC. He was really good against Pitt over the last 2 years. Can he continue that forward? What was a really good season opener in SEC play will be the question for him.
Yeah, and then we talk about like if he can get it. It's like, well, this is the cool part about having Roman Harrison and Joshua Josephs and Caleb Herring is like he won't have to do that. It won't be expected. So if he is gassed or when we get to SEC play, you need to rotate a little bit more. It's not like I'm completely out on Joshua Josephs. I just looked at the highest ceiling of this group is James Pearce, and Pearce should be. I mean, I don't know if it necessarily matters like who starts. It's really just who gets the most snaps. But I think something else that Brooks Austin pointed out on Twitter, the Georgia film guy, when he was perusing the Tennessee film from Saturday, what stood out to him, I don't have the tweet in front of me, was basically like the guys they had last year got better. So that like across the board on defense. So, and that was something that jumped out. Like Kamal Hadden looks bigger and better. You look at Danico Slaughter, they didn't throw at him basically all day. Like Danico was just, he was fine. He was just on his own island and wasn't really targeted. So that's a good thing. Aaron Beasley's better. He's bigger, faster, stronger. And Keenan Peely, better than what Tennessee had a year ago. And then you look at Amari Thomas. I think he's better. Tyler Barron definitely looked better and probably the best he's looked in a Tennessee uniform. James Pearce is better. You just look up and down the list. It's just a lot of guys on that defense has just continued to develop, get bigger, get stronger. And it's just something I told my dad yesterday. I'm like, it's just Tennessee finally looks like an SEC defense with SEC guys. Like there, you can just see a lot of blue chippers now and a lot of SEC speed on that defense that we have not seen to this point in the Heupel era. It made me very excited just to see that defensive line. Now, again, Virginia's offensive line is not good. This offense is not very good, but you see things that just we haven't seen to this point, and Tennessee had to make that jump, especially on the defensive line, if their defense as a whole is going to get better come conference play.
Yeah, I'm pumping the brakes on some of that, especially with the secondary. I mean, you're right. Danico Slaughter, I was great. You didn't see the ball thrown to him. Kamal Hadden, I thought he obviously played well. Still, not turning the head on deep passes. And, I don't know if you call that lucky or not, but you got your hand up and you're not looking at the ball. You just got to hope that the ball runs into it. And he's in good coverage on those plays. But again, this isn't a very explosive Virginia offense. So again, defensive line improvement, I completely agree with. Linebacker Aaron Beasley looked fantastic. Keenan Peely, I will also pump the brakes on saying he's better than Jeremy Banks was last year, but I thought looked good. Didn't look out of place. Didn't look slow or like he was going to have issues out in space, which was the concern. And then I guess that leads me to the other guy, the kind of under radar guy I thought played really well, which is Elijah Herring. You as a hater, and
hold on, not as a player, as a uniform guy. Like my beef with Elijah is the beef with the uniforms. He's not wearing what?
Your beef is with the uniforms, but you have used it against him as what I can see him be doing.
As I should. It's unacceptable. No gloves, no armbands, no anything as a linebacker. You're not a fullback in 1973. We got to get you some merch. We got to get you some stuff on the arm. Like there's just I don't enjoy it. I don't like the look. I don't want you looking like Jason Kendall, a la Pittsburgh Pirates over there. Can't do it.
Better career award than Yadier Molina, by the way. People forget
that. Hey, Elijah Herring might have a better Tennessee linebacker career than Al Wilson. Many are saying, like Ryan Schumpert on this very program.
But no, Elijah Herring was really good in the opener, and Arian Carter, not that he was bad, maybe a little underwhelming, a little bit less snaps than I thought, and just a takeaway for general. Probably my biggest takeaway at linebacker, because I expected Aaron Beasley to look really good. I expected him to look better. I said he's the guy that's, to me, most likely on this defense to be an all-SEC guy by the end of the year. But probably my biggest takeaway from the linebackers is that Elijah Herring is, at least for right now, firmly entrenched as the number 3 linebacker, and he's going to play the third most snaps, and Arian Carter and Caleb Perry will follow him.
And maybe it helps just because Jeremiah Thielander got a lot of snaps, him and Arian Carter at the end of that game in the fourth, where they're just deeper, and it's having somebody like Arian Carter and Jeremiah Thielander behind Elijah Herring, that's good for them, where it's like Elijah has to play harder. These guys in front of them have to push harder because they're freshmen who are extremely talented that are pushing these guys, where in the past 2 years, the depth was such an issue. your spot just kind of solidified. It's like, I'm the best you got. So there's just, it's a
Yeah.
little bit different where you can just see there's a lot more pressure all across the board because there are actual bodies behind them that can push them and take snaps.
I mean, 2021, they had 3 linebackers. I mean,
Yeah.
Juwan Mitchell didn't play after Florida. They had 3 linebackers. They played the entire season, and respectfully, Sullivan Page III was one of them. And it was like in SEC big games, it was like, let's try to get 20 snaps out of this guy. So you basically had Aaron Beasley and Jeremy Banks playing every single snap or very close to it. So the depth is it's a lot better really across the board on defense. But I think linebacker is the spot where you look at it continuously top to bottom, and it's just a 180 from where it was 2 years ago, and especially like you said at the end of the game in fourth quarter when you have mop-up duty guys that look like SEC linebackers in there.
Here's the other side, and Brent Hubbs made the point here in one of his VolQuest articles today. Friend of the program, Brent. He said, quote, they had a turnover on downs and 3 straight punts, gaining 55 total yards. And the Orange Bowl, they had a stretch of 4 straight punts where they gained a total of 26 yards. This was something that I had jotted down following the clip where I pumped the brakes on how people were discussing Joe Milton and this offense post Hendon Hooker, like over the long term. I think this is still going to be very rocky. I don't think Joe has changed all that much. Like, he ran the ball a lot more than I thought they were going to design runs for Joe Milton because he's taken some shots. And I mean, obviously he had the great stiff arm on that poor Virginia corner at one point in this game. But I think something that I gathered, and also let's just go ahead and say, I don't think it's a coincidence that the drives where Jaylen Wright was nowhere to be found were the drives where Tennessee's offense stalled. And let's just say it sucked. Like, those drives were bad. Those drives were quick, and the defense had to go back on the field. And in a previous era, the Tennessee defense is not looking good, and Tennessee might be in a more mercurial spot than where they were yesterday, just because they're deeper and the defense is a lot better, and Virginia is struggling with this, that, and the other. But I think the way I look at this is going to be a significantly more balanced Tennessee team than what we've seen last year. So the fans who are waiting and they're like, oh, it's just game 1, it's week 1. Let's see what happens over the next couple weeks. We're going to see the fireworks. It's going to start to trickle back. I don't think the fireworks are coming. I think this is going to be a very safe, very quick at the line of scrimmage, a lot of screens. We saw a lot here, a lot of stuff to the back, the running backs. We saw a lot of stuff there. I don't think they are going to be nearly as comfortable. Joe was 1 of 6 on balls 20 plus yards downfield. One of them was a big drop by Ramel, but by and large, still a lot of misses. The touch isn't the same as Hendon. I just look at it. The interceptions are not coming. He completed 70% of his passes, and it was why I was saying all offseason, I'm like, I'm not worried about Joe's completion percentage. Like, Heupel guys, like, they eventually figure it out, and they don't throw picks, and they have high completion percentages. Like, that's just going to happen. Joe will be fine there. I just look at this year's offense. Dylan Sampson, 4 TDs. Jaylen Wright, Jabari Small, they carried the load. When things went astray, like, those 3 kept Tennessee afloat when the receivers were not in sync. And this is just something I think is going to be the key, not the key, just the theme of this year's Tennessee Volunteers team. And I'm very curious to see what that means for where the offense is scoring. Like, you look through PFF, it's not like they're in the top 10 through this week. Like, this was a bad, I shouldn't say bad. This was a bad in terms of what we've seen from Josh Heupel through 2 years offensive showing by and large. I don't know why, if you figured out what happened with Jaylen Wright, why he was just absent for so many drives in a row, because it was evident. And that was something I'd written down. Like, if Jalen's out, like, this is a problem, because I think my biggest takeaway, and I've said it over and over again, Jaylen Wright is the difference maker. Jaylen Wright has made the leap. I don't know if he's Alvin Kamara, but he is going to be the next big running back taken early in an NFL draft, and Tennessee hasn't had that guy in a really long time, and it's fun. It's just fans are going to take a couple weeks, I think, to get used to the fact that the high-flying Jalen Hyatt, deep balls, deep shots, I think that's not happening this year. I think it might be back next year with Nico and company. I don't think it's happening this year. I think they're going to play it safe and try and run it down your throat.
Well, you just had a lot there, so a lot to process.
I told you, I miss these shows.
Well, you just asked why Jaylen Wright was absent for multiple drives. I'll answer that one first. Tennessee played what you didn't call bad, but underwhelming offensive game, and they won by 36 points. That's why Jaylen Wright. You didn't see Jaylen Wright every play. It's a position that puts a lot on puts a lot on the running backs or position that puts a lot of physical burden on someone that carries the ball a lot. And when Tennessee touts its depth all offseason, they do it. They have their three top rushers back. In a game like that, they were going to split the carries, and even as clearly better. And Jaylen Wright was clearly the best running back. And you're right, in those drives they stalled, it was Jabari Small and Jaylen Wright on the field. Not Jaylen Wright, Dylan Sampson on the field. But even those drives, or even Dylan Sampson and Jabari Small still had good rushing averages. Like, they still ran the ball overall effective, not at the same level. So, to me, it's pretty easier trying to get all those guys involved. You're not trying to work anyone too hard in a game. You're going to win, again, by 36 points. Tennessee heads to Florida. That game's competitive. Tennessee plays South Carolina, A&M. Those games are competitive. That's when, if it's still 33, 33, 33 on the carries between those three, that's when the criticism will be very valid. I think by then you'll be seeing Jaylen Wright getting 60% of the carries from that group. At least 50%, I think probably close to 60%. So that's my thought on that. Agree.
Yeah, I think it should be 60, 30, 10. Like 60 Jaylen, 30 Dylan, and then 10 Jabari. Jabari's just a vulture back now. Like, it's time to transition to vulture goal line guy, Jabari Small.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, what we're just saying, the 60 to 30 or 60, 30, 10. I think it's much more likely you get the 60 from Jaylen Wright than you only get 10 from Jabari Small. I just don't see him having that small of a role. Again, like, I agree with you from the logical standpoint of, I think he's Tennessee's third most talented running back. Dylan Sampson and Jaylen Wright are both more talented, but he's just solid, and they have so much trust in him that I don't think you're going to see his role diminish that much in his senior season. Onto the offense as a whole, I mean, it's not compared to last year. Like, no, it's not going to be the fireworks because Tennessee hit like 3 60-yard touchdowns, felt like every game. So I don't think that's going to happen. You're just not going to see like the long touchdowns. I don't know if I agree with that. I think you're going to see a lot more. Tennessee hit the deep passes to set up the run last year. It's going to be flipped. It's going to be old school football, and Tennessee wants to run the ball to bring guys into the box and get favorable matchups down the field. And then you're going to see them take those shots. And I think they will hit more of those shots. I felt like the game plan was pretty vanilla against Virginia. Maybe that is how it's going to be the entire season. And there's still, question marks about what Joe can do throwing the ball in the intermediate and down the field. So maybe that is the case. I'd kind of not go quite that far after game one, and I just would side more with what you said of this being a run-first offense that wants to win with running the football first, unless that necessarily the deep shots and the deep passing plays are going to fall with that.
And that's okay. Like, you can still win a lot of games, and I think it's just good that, like, some years it's just personnel. The personnel will continue to change.
Yeah, it's called good coaching.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, like, I don't want to harp on the negative in terms of, like, look, Tennessee, the sky's falling, this, that, and the other. I'm just saying it's going to be different, and Joe being a Heisman-type quarterback's not coming. Like, this is going to be a run. If anyone in this offense has a Heisman-type year, it's Jaylen Wright. Like, that's what you're looking at. I was thinking about
that. Didn't we have a conversation like that in the offseason where you were saying that?
Yeah.
That Jaylen Wright was more likely to win the Heisman than Joe?
Yeah.
No, I still disagree with that, just from, like, Jaylen Wright's not going to get enough carries.
But what I'm saying is if he did, he would be in that conversation. If he was treated as like the guy getting 80% of the carries and touches, then I think he in this offense would have that kind of lane if Tennessee wins enough games.
Yeah, he could. Like, I very much see the path to, like, Jaylen Wright being, getting some Heisman votes where Joe Milton doesn't, or theoretically being higher on the list, but just the ceiling that Jaylen Wright has to win the Heisman is, I think Joe Milton's going to win the Heisman, but that ceiling is much, much higher for him. I think more attainable, where I don't really think it is for Wright.
What was, when you look at the special teams, D. Williams giveth, D. Williams taketh, bad fumble at one point, but he also had some big runs. He's still just an unbelievably dangerous returner, and it's just fun to have guys like D. Williams on your team because he could break one at any given moment, and that's just going to be fun every week. But he's also someone who, if he gets hit weird or he does, there was another play where he put his heels in the end zone to down it on the one, and you're like, okay, what are we doing? There's a couple of those, so it's just, I think it's just going to be that kind of year, and you just kind of have to live with it. But in terms of Jackson Ross, Ryan, you and I talked a lot last year about Paxton Brooks and like the sleepy little thing of like maybe why Tennessee was going for it a lot and they were very aggressive was just that like Paxton was one of the worst SEC punters a season ago, and you thought it couldn't get worse in terms of punting last year. And then Jackson Ross, week 1, who, look, week 1, Heupel defended his guy as he should. He's ambidextrous or whatever. It's not ambidextrous for kicking. What is it for feet?
I don't know, but you're right. It's not ambidextrous.
I don't know what it is for feet. Being able to use both feet effectively. They did not work. Yeah, it didn't go. Maybe it's his left foot. What we saw at the end of yesterday.
His left-footed punt was one of his better ones.
Right, so maybe he needs to only kick with his left foot. It's kind of jarring to see him run around every punt. That kind of scares me coming into conference play, where he doesn't just sit back there and just line up and punt. He's just
you're such a redneck for that take. Are you kidding me? We're gonna sit here and act like LSU and Florida haven't had Australian punters for 15, 20 years who are really good doing that. I saw someone say that on Twitter. I don't mean any disrespect to the person who said it, because I think it's someone that follows me and interacts with a lot of my tweets. But that is such a redneck take. I mean,
I love it.
Come on.
Not my Vols.
We can't go. We can't have this guy running back there in the backfield. This punter. What does he think? He's an athlete? No, it's Australian rugby punting.
Yeah, it's
teams have been doing it for 2 decades, and it's when they have good punters at it, it works really well.
It's jarring, Ryan. It makes me feel uneasy. It makes me feel like something's always breaking down. I'm just so used to the traditional of like, there it is, back there, line up, punt. This man's running.
People don't get these are the punters that can convert you fake punts because they do that little
True.
Run. And then maybe once a year, the team's not paying attention, and he does that little run every time. They start turning around to go set up the return. Boom, first down.
I'm more concerned about
who's going to be complaining about the Australian punter then?
I'm not complaining. I'm saying, I'm complaining about the yardage.
You were complaining.
I want the yardage to be better. I want him to not shank 2 punts against Alabama.
You said him running in the backfield makes you uneasy. So let's get that on the record.
I'm 32 years old, Ryan. Once you get to a certain age, rugby rules punting just makes you a little uneasy. Dairy also makes you uneasy, and when you reach your 30s, driving in the left lane, like you just kind of want to be in that right lane. You want to kind of loud music.
I'm 24 and I'm like that on the lanes.
Yeah, I'm a right lane guy. Drives my wife crazy. I'm hanging out. I'll get there when I get there. Yeah, what am I doing? I got John Coltrane playing. No, we're fine. We'll get there.
We're cruising.
Yeah. Jackson Ross, it's just like chaos. Ball snapped. He's got to decide if he's going to kick with his left foot or his right foot. Which way is he going? Does he know going into it whether or not he's kicking with his left or right foot? Do you think? Do you think he decides?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm positive because they blocked for whatever way he was going. They were very aware which foot he was punting with.
But what if he changes his mind?
If he changes his mind, I think a punt's going to get blocked, and then your uneasy feelings about the rugby style punting will be valid.
God, what if I accidentally just predicted something like this, where he forgets like once the ball snapped which one he said, and then he's just feeling it because he has to have one that is the dominant foot. This is all stuff. I want Jackson Ross on the podcast. I want to figure all this out. I want to learn how this all works. How does he needs to sell me on not being uneasy over this?
You got to go on to the. I guess my overall Jackson Ross assessment is that he needs to be better. But I don't think his job's in danger right now. Josh Turbeville, the kickoff specialist, too, also wasn't great with 2 kicks out of bounds. He is the backup punter, so they have another punter. This continues throughout the season, but I think right now they'll continue to roll with Jackson Ross.
Also, when it comes to punting with Tennessee, I'm not really that nervous. Like, there are a lot of schools that you should be nervous about your punter, like it matters. Like Iowa.
Yeah.
The punting has to be locked down. You're going to be punting a lot at Iowa. Yes. You need to know, like, you need to be locked in.
Punter. You're going to be out there a lot.
Yeah. Tennessee's punter's not going to be out there a lot. Who I'm more concerned I shouldn't say concerned, more curious about is Charlie Campbell. And we haven't seen him yet because I want to see what he looks like. That's more of kicking will matter significantly more for Tennessee than the punter. So Tennessee fans freaking out about Jackson Ross. I don't think that's going to make or break the season. Now, Charlie Campbell, what he looks like, we'll see. I just want to see it. We didn't really get to see much of him in this one, but I'm curious how that unfolds. Did you jot down at any moment, oh man, this is where the offensive line issues pop up? Did you see any particular left side, right side, any troubles? Dane Davis getting a lot of snaps at center was something I jotted down. A lot of rotation, and I don't think you really noticed. And the biggest thing, run blocking was significantly better. I think the pass blocking was a problem in protection. I think maybe that's part of why Joe was not taking more deep shots in this one, just because they were maybe worried about that a little bit. There was one play where there was it the Joe where he went the wrong way, but there was a weird snap to Joe, and he went. Was Jaylen in the game? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where there was a bobbled connection.
There was like a read option play at one point that it didn't look like Jacob Warren was blocking it, as if Milton could have kept the football, and Milton kept the football. So then he kind of just had to dive forward for like a yard.
Yeah. But by and large, were you pleasantly surprised by how the offensive line played, or was there any strong, let's see how this unfolds over the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, nothing really strong. I would say, I mean, they played better than, maybe a little bit better than I expected, just because Virginia's defense line is supposed to be their strength. The pass blocking wasn't great, but not disastrous at any times. I think there's one. John Campbell had a holding, gave up one sack in a bad moment. Gave up a sacked them out of field goal range. But
yeah,
no, you're right. It was kind of hard to track with just how many substitutions there were. You're right. How much? I guess the two things I had: one, how much Dane Davis played center. He's hard to miss out there when he's playing center, because he's like the tallest center you're
That's funny you say that. That's the reason I knew that's why I noticed he was out there so much. It was like he's just so much bigger. Like, you don't see centers who are like 6'7". Like, he's gigantic at center. It looked really weird.
Yes, and then the other thing I had was just that the tempo, I thought, was without Cooper Mays was significantly worse. And some of that, I think there were more Tennessee's offense kind of failed to get into a rhythm for a lot of the first half, and I think there were maybe even some more check with knees at the line of scrimmage with Joe. But just as a whole, Ollie Lane, it was like there was one play I remember, he was on the ground, and I was watching him, and he's like laboring to get up off the ground, his 6-year senior knees and all that good stuff, and he's just like run up the line of scrimmage. He was one of the last offensive linemen there, get it, snap it like immediately. So it was not that was shocking. I think we knew that was probably the biggest concern with Cooper Mays out, was just Tennessee being able to play at the same pace. But the tempo, I didn't think was nearly. I doubt Josh Heupel was pleased with it, and I think it'll get a lot better when Cooper Mays is back in the lineup.
Yeah, and I wonder too. Like, John Campbell, obviously the block of the year. Did you notice that in real time, or did you see it on? Yeah,
I saw it. I saw it after the fact. What I noticed real time, fantastic catch by Dylan Sampson on the pitch. Wasn't a great pitch by Joe. Kind of caught it left-handed out away from the body a little bit. Nice. I mean, Joe was getting hit, so it wasn't like it was a clean pitch or anything. But nice catch by Dylan Sampson. That's what I noticed on the play live.
I wonder if they do more design stuff. Like, that was a big thing I jotted down. I was like, I was not going to bank on nearly as many Joe Milton design runs as they were going to do. I mean, all you have is a true freshman behind him right now, and he's going to take some shots. Joe looks skinnier and more athletic. I don't know if you noticed that too. Like, he's gonna take some shots, and clearly they're comfortable with him running. And I think they just are like, this is a part of this offense. He has to run the football to add that element. And the 2 rushing touchdowns were big, but like, I'm curious to see if that's something they continue, because those shots, some of them were pretty strong. And he's not as afraid of. I shouldn't say Hendon was afraid of contact, but Hendon didn't want to get contact. He was still trying to find the outside to get out of bounds. He was trying to find that boundary area a lot. When he would take off, he would run to the side. He would run, like, I'm going to get this first down, and then I'm hopping out of bounds. Joe is like, I'm going to stuff this cornerback's face into the dirt. I think they're just wired differently, and I wonder if that's still going to continue, or something we need to monitor is the amount of hits Joe's taking week in, week out, because he is not going to run from contact, as we've seen still.
No, he's not. I mean, the stiff arm play, as nice and cool as it was, might get him killed against Georgia or Alabama or something like that. You can't run, get 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and then stop. Like, that's not going to end well for you most of the time.
No.
So yeah, I was surprised with that too. It felt like some of it was like situational. I felt like they got into a couple first, second, and longs and random with QB draws, like spread out the defense, thinking that they could get 7-8 yards back there. And then he scrambled on a couple of them too. So I thought he had, the one scramble he had maybe 15, 20 yards, and I think that was the second quarter. Was encouraging from the pocket presence side of things.
Mhm.
But no, you're right. They just ran Joe a little more than I expected.
Biggest thing you're looking for them to clean up going into Austin P next week is what, Ryan?
Special teams.
Mm.
I mean, nothing else that they do that cleans up against Austin P is going to tell me anything besides special teams.
Mm.
Special teams, I mean, obviously there's a little bit more pressure on the road, tight games, but generally speaking, punting, pretty low pressure job. Kickoff specials, pretty low pressure job. Let's see if those guys kind of get the first game nerves out of the way and kick the ball well. And I guess number 2 is to see how much Cooper Mays plays. I do think he should get out there if he can play this week. Typically it's like, you don't want to push him for a game like Austin P. I think it would be good for the offense to just get some reps with him in there. I mean, he's been out since like the day 8, day 9 of fall camp. So I think it would be good for the offense to get a little continuity with him before they head to Gainesville.
Final thing here, and I think this is something that Tennessee fans are going to monitor over the course of the year, Ryan. Are you now changing your perspective on this wide receiver group? And something that I had jotted down, I think Tennessee's going to have to decide if it's Dante Thornton or Squirrel White, and that's their 3, and roll with it. We were wondering all offseason, right? Like, are they going to rotate at receiver now that they have a lot more talent? No. They were out, like, Heupel was clearly annoyed with the receivers, right? Like, with his post-game comments, like, it seemed like there was something there, especially in the first half. Because what did he say about the first half and the skill position guys? What did he say specifically?
Like they didn't get in. They struggled to get into a rhythm. Some of the skill position guys, and obviously that was the receivers. Let's see if I can find the exact quote. But go on.
I think part of it is Thornton's in there sometimes, Squirrel's in there sometimes. This is the first time with Ramel in that starting spot. Brew is as the wide receiver 1. He wasn't targeted, or he really wasn't pushed the way I thought he was going to be looked at in this game. I don't know. I'm very curious to see if that's something they go with the 4 or 5 and we expand out. I think you're going to have to make a decision if you're Heupel. Here, who is our 3? And then that's it. And then they build that rhythm and they build that just camaraderie. And I mean, even in year 1, Jalen Hyatt still got some snaps in that spot where they would sub him in for stuff. Like, it wasn't like he didn't play when they were going with Javonte, Velas, and Cedric. He was still getting in there, but like not nearly obviously as what they had a year ago. I just think part of me is like, I don't think you want to do this every week with this wide receiver room. I think you're going to have to make a decision. I don't know who when you make it, but you just need to say these are our 3 and they're playing 80 to 90% of our snaps together. And I don't know who it's going to be. My guess would be it would be Squirrel based on the targets and what we saw in week 1. Is that an overreaction, Ryan, to what we saw? Because I think this kind of issue is going to keep popping up.
The quote Heupel was, I felt like just in general, our skill kids were not completely in the flow of the game. Yeah, I think it's an overreaction. I mean, I'm not saying that that's true. Like, there's no validity to it. We could look up in 6 weeks, a month, 2 months, and be like, yeah, that it wouldn't shock me if I looked up and said, yeah, that is right. But no, I think that's an overreaction to draw that conclusion from game 1. I will say, I feel like I'm going to flip here because you flipped on me. Essentially, is what happened. You said on this very program less than a month ago and said they're going to have to play Chaz Nimrod and Caleb Webb. They're going to play Chaz Nimrod and Caleb Webb this year. This is the year they do it.
Yeah.
And I told you no then, and I'll still tell you no. Though.
Oh, you're right. No, I flipped on this. After seeing it, I'm out. I flipped on it. I'm out.
I will say they did kind of do what I said. I thought they'd do, where they played them in a game that was 28 points, not 40. 28 points. They played them earlier in the second half. They gave them some opportunities. But no, I think if 4 guys, yes, it's not going to be Nimrod and Caleb Webb. You're not going to see them play a ton. But with that one spot or tinkering with it a little bit, I'm hesitant to say after game 1 that it's like that's not going to work and they're just going to abandon that.
Okay. I like it, Ryan. Well, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Rocky Top Insider this week?
Plenty of stuff recapping Virginia. We'll have content on Austin P as well, but obviously with it being Austin P, it'll be a lot more stuff focused on game one and focused Tennessee centric. So we had PFF grades up today, 5 critical moments, big moments from the game. Talked about, we talked some Tennessee offense. We didn't talk a lot of specific Joe Milton, but I'll give a little tease. Talked about, to me, the most encouraging play and the most discouraging sequence of the game from Joe Milton, which was that touchdown to Dylan Sampson to start the game. I thought was his best play, and then the sequence that I kind of hinted at, where 2nd and 2 on the edge of field goal range, incompletion, snaps the ball when his receivers aren't set, takes a sack on 3rd down. So kind of dove into why those two things stood out to me, and a couple other critical moments from a nice 36-point game.
They're gonna hate how critical I was about this game.
You weren't as bad as I worried you would be.
I think
that you did hint at the Dante Thornton Squirrel White take, and it was a little explosive, a little overreactionary for me. But overall, I think everything else you said was relatively. It might not have been what people wanted to hear.
Yeah,
but I don't think it was necessarily all that negative.
I think people are just like, they really want Joe to be awesome and fun, and it be like Hendon was a year ago. And I just don't think it's coming. I think fans are going to be like, well, what, when is it going to be fun? And I just don't think you're going to have that kind of fun, just hitting bomb after bomb, and it just the offense humming on all cylinders every single week. I just don't think it's going to be the case.
But I said all offseason, like, Tennessee's offense would still be really good, but it was just so elite at the little things. We talked about it on here. Scored touchdowns every time they were in the red zone. 3rd and short, they could just line up and run it right at people and get it. 4th and 1, they'd run it up. Like, it was just easy. The little things that you take for granted, Tennessee's offense was so good at last year.
Like, this won't be the number one scoring team in the country. This won't be the number one scoring team.
But to your point, when this team's like, I don't know, 15th in scoring, and they're scoring 35 points a game, and I don't know, go 9-3 or something. If people, the Tennessee fans that are complaining about it not being fun, need to be slapped across the face. It's like, are you kidding me? You watched Jeremy Pruitt for 3 years and Tennessee be horrible, and you're gonna complain about it not being fun enough, like a Urban Meyer Spurrier era Florida fan, when you're winning 9 games and your offense is still top 20 in the country. Like, you're right. People will be like that, but that's a ridiculous opinion to have. It's a ridiculous way to go about your life, being so upset so easily that Tennessee, you're just mad that it's boring when Tennessee has a top 15 offense.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a top 30-ish defense nationally, and I think it's going to be like a top I think it stays in the 15th. I think Heupel, it's going to be really hard for him to fall out of the top 15 in scoring. But if it's like 13th, wouldn't surprise me. Like, I just think the folks who are like top 5 offense year in, year out, and like, I don't see it with this group. I think it's going to be very Jaylen Wright heavy, very Dylan Sampson heavy. Like you said, the best way to describe it, this is a team that will run to set up the pass. Last year, they were passing to set up the run, and the fireworks are not coming. So embrace it, folks. Don't be mad week in, week out, Vol fans. That's just how this team is going to run. And it's not going to be as sexy, Ryan. It's just going to be efficient, no picks, play and keep away, and take their deep shots when they're there. But enjoy it, because it could be so much worse. Hence the South Carolina Gamecocks, hence Florida Gators. It could be way worse. The floor is extremely high. It's just not going to be as fun as a year ago.
And Jaylen Wright, he's awesome, dude. Like, his vision, his physicality that he runs with, his ability to high step over tacklers going low is just so impressive. So he's going to be super fun to watch run the ball. And I mean, it was like I was talking to somebody during the South Carolina game last night, not to go full college football show on the Tennessee show. It's like the announcers were pumping up North Carolina's pass rush, as they should. 9 sacks. I think I had it wrong in a tweet where I said they had 8. Even if North Carolina's pass rush really is like super improved, like North Carolina thinks it is, like it looked like last night, like that's a middle of the pack SEC defensive line. That was worrisome. I mean, I think Florida.
Tennessee is going to bury the South Carolina team in Knoxville. Like, with that offensive line, and you come
Spencer
into this.
Rattler could be in physical harm when he goes to Athens in a few weeks if Kirby Smart wants him to be, and that's not even I'm not even being sarcastic. That's not being hyperbolic. If Kirby Smart wants it to be, it could be physically dangerous for Spencer Rattler a few weeks in Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, it's rough. And that's what you needed to happen if you're Tennessee, is like you need the guys around them, the Floridas, the South Carolinas, even Kentucky, whose offense didn't look great. Devin Leary looked okay, but that offensive line looks a little rough still. Ray Davis looks like a dude for Kentucky, but outside of that, I don't know. I think Tennessee, week 1, if you're a Tennessee fan, you're like, you were worried about not falling out of the top 2 in the East. I don't think you need to be worried about it as of right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. None of Tennessee's players, brothers who were in the NFL were tweeting about how their brother should transfer to a different school.
That's tough.
This was wild. I made sure, as a Big J journalist, I made sure to screenshot that before Travis Etienne could delete it. I don't know. Maybe he hasn't deleted it, but
I don't know.
That's, if you're Billy Napier grinding tape on Saturday in the office trying to get better, you get that text them to you. That's tough day.
Man, hate to see it. Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you next week.